terrorist organization Willie Nelson, the White House, Scotland's home birth strengthened in the Gulf of America after Hurricane Center specialist Malik happened.
Very reasonable chance it's going to completely dissipate before the end of the week. Yes, it kind of flies on the Gulf Coast of Louisiana. Just beginning of the Texas producing some heavy rainfall, but expecting a much weaker system when it gets to that area.
Republicans desperate to hang on control of Congress after the Pittsburgh House Majority Leader Steve Scalise warns Democratic Socialists have some big changes in mind if they what they want to do. They want chaos. They want power over what they want. They can't articulate a real clear agenda for the American people because they've been fighting us all.
On your schedule and at your convenience. With CHM, you're paying half the cost of a traditional health insurance plan. So that puts more money back into your budget for everyday needs. Plus, you'll have access to CHM's care solutions for virtual appointments, prescription savings, surgery support, and more. My family and I joined in 2018, and it's changed our lives to be better. We love paying way less while helping other relievers afford their medical bills. Take the leap of faith and see why Christians across the nation are better with CHM.
Get started by calling 1-833-CHM and use promo code WELLNESS for a 50% credit towards your first month. That's 1-833-JOIN-CHM and
I've been driving trucks for a long time. Safety is my number one priority. I know that the truck has legal blind spots. That's why I remember to check my mirrors often for smaller vehicles. Everyone can help keep our roads safe. Next time you're behind the wheel, try to avoid lingering in those blind spots. It can be dangerous. Let's all plan to share the road safely. Learn how at www.sharetheroadsafely.gov.
The Department for Aging and Independent Living within the Kentucky Cabinet for Health and Family Services wants to promote the Aging Disability Resource Center. Check your number calling 779-500-07
of our department. The supplemental funding request is not a substitute.
For 90 million people, your hands are bloody of 17 Americans and 4,000.
The witness will suspend until order is restored in the committee room. I know that individuals feel very passionately, but we must have order in the hearing room so that we can proceed. We're now going to move forward with our hearing, and Secretary Hickseth, please proceed.
Thank you. The supplemental funding request is not a substitute for the president's full $1.5 trillion base budget request. $1.5 trillion.
Mr. Secretary, please Suspend until order is
These are jerks,
restored in the hearing
these
room.
people.
We will begin
Communists.
the timing clock since you've been interrupted twice.
And they hate Israel.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
1.5 trillion is what the president seeks and what we need to defend the country. The members of this committee understand better than most that long-term strategic dominance cannot be funded through one-off supplementals.
Veterans, call for ending this war right now.
We will have order in the hearing room. Mr. Secretary, please proceed.
Collectively, the budget proposals submitted under President Trump follow a simple logic.
I would ask that the Capitol please, whose professionalism I admire, remove those who are
Communists.
seeking to disrupt the hearing. Please proceed.
President Trump is following a simple logic. The military requires a generational investment to deliver on peace through strength. We know the best way to create peace is to prepare for war, to deter it. And that's exactly what the Department of War is doing, building a force so capable that it would be absurd for anyone to challenge it. As the direct result of neglected priorities and gross negligence that ignored threats left over from the previous administration, President Trump inherited a set of global and domestic crises, deferred maintenance almost across the board. Instead of steering the ship through gathering storms, former leaders let our military languish through social experiments and globalist appeasement, sheer weakness. Under President Trump, we have built a different type of department. The Pentagon is no longer run by bureaucrats. Instead, it's led by combat-tested veterans and world-class business leaders who are running the department like a business, and tech titans who are bringing lethal innovation to the battlefield. We're also at a different moment, and we cannot afford inaction. If we don't make critical investments right now in tech, in compute, in AI, in autonomy, in space, our adversaries who are already making these types of investments could outpace us. Without these funds, we face critical shortfalls that threaten our ability to also simply pay our service members, rapidly replenish equipment and munitions, and sustain vital operations without disruption. This supplemental request serves two purposes: sustain our military readiness to meet this year's new demands, and accelerate critical capabilities to replace and augment those we have used in contingencies. But make no mistake, this is not a one-for-one replacement. We are upgrading and we are modernizing across the force. On the readiness front, we requested $21 billion. This will fund military pay, replace much of the equipment utilized during recent operations, sustain forward deployed forces, and grow personnel and strength while stabilizing mission-critical fueled shortfalls and supporting the National Guard. On the capability side, we requested $46 billion. These funds will expand production lines and accelerate delivery of high-demand munitions. We're talking about solid rocket motors, JDAMs, hypersonics, and counter-drone capabilities. Additionally, we will use this investment to secure digital and space dominance, including resilient satellite networks. Department leadership recognizes that appropriating those funds is just the first step. Once funds are appropriated, or portioned, to the department, we need to promptly execute on them, and that's why we're requesting targeted legislative authorities, like transfer authority, to prioritize our greatest needs and opportunities, multi-year procurement for weapon systems, revolutionizing the speed and scale of munitions procurement, and New START authorities. Rest assured that every dollar appropriated to the Department of War will be focused on building the lethality of our joint force and reinforcing peace through strength. As I have said before, not fully funding this department, the Department of War, and we know what that means, that means 1.5 trillion, given the world that we live in and the disaster of what the Biden administration budgets gave us. Not funding this department at $1.5 trillion, I believe, is the greatest threat that our nation faces. Either we invest in our warriors at this moment of step change on the battlefield and growing threats, or this is all just talk. I look forward to working with this committee to secure those funds so that our warfighters can continue to do their work every day to keep our great republic safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Kane.
Chair Collins, Vice Chair Murray, distinguished members of this committee, I'm honored today to appear before you with Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Rollins to testify on the Department of War's fiscal 2026 supplemental funding request. And I'll note I fondly remember my time at USDA earlier in my career where I had the chance to serve there. I'm also joined today by my senior enlisted advisor, SEAC Dave Isom. As always, I'm deeply grateful for this committee's continued partnership and support for our common defense. I'd like to begin by expressing my deep condolences and that of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the SEAC for the fallen from this past weekend and their families. Today we remember First Lieutenant Tyler Feehan, Sergeant Michael Swinton, and Private Isabel Gonzalez, and note that the names of our last fallen will be released when we can. I'm humbled daily by the profound commitment of the incredible 2.8 million Americans, just like these names that I've just mentioned, who make up our joint force and serve our nation every day. Also, on behalf of the Joint Force and the Joint Chiefs, I want to express my sincere and heartfelt condolences to the family of Senator Graham for their loss and all of you for the loss of your colleague. The Joint Force remains grateful for his 44 years of service, both in and out of uniform. There is no doubt he made a difference to the safety and security of our nation. On July 22nd, 1940, General George C. Marshall said, and I quote, "For almost 20 years, we had all of the time and almost none of the money. Today we have all of the money and no time." His words resonate powerfully with me today as we find ourselves in a somewhat similar situation. I've come to you today to request the necessary funds while in the window of opportunity, while time is still on our side. The United States of America faces a global list of military challenges in the Middle East, in Europe, in the Pacific, both nuclear and non-nuclear challenges, and the continued threat of terrorism. We find ourselves living and leading in complex and dynamic times. Our adversaries are aligning in their interests, creating simultaneous challenges across multiple domains. They are sharing intelligence, combat capabilities, and technology that is accelerating the speed of war. It is an imperative that Americans understand that the character of war is changing. Advances in technology are fundamentally and irreversibly changing the way we fight, which necessitates capital to properly arm America's military. Rapid advancements in AI, autonomous systems, deliver critical technological advantages to our national defense and simultaneously introduce unprecedented strategic vulnerabilities and uncertainty across the world, to include right here at home. The low barrier to entry created by affordable, ubiquitous, unmanned systems means our adversaries, rogue actors, state and non-state actors, and violent extremists have access to disruptive and potentially lethal technologies at scale. We've seen this in Ukraine, and we must adopt elements of this fight for our future fights. Conflict is never confined neatly to the land, sea, or air domains. The modern battlefield stretches from the seabed up to cislunar space and beyond, cyberspace, and in the information domain, all at the same time. Our nation must be prepared to fight and win across all of them, all the time, all at once. In addition, the light speed at which information travels now has compressed our leaders' decision space, taking what was once days or weeks in World War II down to milliseconds. Your joint force must be ready because the United States military is America's greatest insurance policy. And I acknowledge us, all of us find it difficult at times to pay for insurance before we need it. But we must have insurance before the storm comes. The Armed Forces of the United States of America serves as our nation's ultimate safeguard and our insurance policy to preserve, protect, and defend our national interests, security, and prosperity. To uphold this responsibility, we require predictable and consistent funding. This will allow us to partner effectively with our defense and national industrial bases, building on acquisition reforms that guarantee our warfighters receive capabilities at scale before they are required in conflict or combat. I'm struck by this season of American history we find ourselves in, and I continue to ask myself, if not now, then when? And if not us in this room and the rest of the Congress and the nation, then who? I acknowledge the environment we all serve in, but always remember that we are all Americans with deep and abiding love of our nation and our military service members and their families. I've come today to ask for your help and your support. America's armed forces need $1.5 trillion to meet the military challenges of the future. This supplemental is a part of that, and to be allowed to use this capital to pay for military personnel, operations and maintenance expenses, and accelerate investments on critical technologies, as the Secretary just mentioned. It is critical that we stay ahead of our adversaries, and we must have the funds before we're out of time.
In here, huh?
In closing, I ask all of us to remember our deployed service members around the...
Would I do anything?
especially our Army teammates who remain deployed after losing their friends and teammates this past weekend. And I again ask all of us here in the Senate and across the American people to never forget our fallen and their families who continue to show us what courage, tenacity, grit, and commitment to the nation looks like. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. Secretary Rollins.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Collins, Ranking Member Murray, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. Let me begin with the bottom line up front. The United States Department of Agriculture is joining today the United States Department of War in a fight for America and for American flourishing. After all, defending America's ability to feed and fuel and clothe herself is defending America, full stop. This can be easily forgotten. For centuries, we built farms and ranches and transportation that fed not only America, but the world too. For a long time, that prosperity made America strong and made America safe. But across the past 100 years, and especially across the last administration, we took that source of strength in war and peace, our farms and our ranches, and the communities that surrounded them, and we hollowed them out. We made them weak, and we put them on the precipice of decline and extinction. We sent our food production overseas. In fact, 2023 was for the first time a significant net importer of our food for America. And in so doing, we replaced American production with massive amounts of imports. We allowed and even encouraged the consolidation of agriculture, seed production, processing, fertilizer, and beyond into massive industries at scale. Today, nearly 85% of our meat packing capacity is controlled by just 4 companies, including 2 that are foreign owned. Additionally, our largest pork company in America is owned by a China company, or China. 4 fertilizer companies now represent 78% of the production versus just a couple of decades ago, that was in the dozens. And 2 seed companies now produce more than 50% of the seed for America. These are national security implications. When President Trump returned to office, America's farm economy faced one of the most difficult economic environments in decades. Between 2020 and 2025, the cost of seed rose 19%, crop protection rose 30%, fertilizer rose over 50%, fuel and oils rose nearly 33%, electricity 36%, and repair and maintenance 27%. As these costs climbed, commodity prices plummeted. Farm income fell by more than $90 billion from 2023 to 2024, representing one of the largest single-year declines in history. At the same time, producers saw not one new trade deal across the world, resulting in an unprecedented $50 billion agricultural trade deficit. American farmers deserve better, and our national security now demands it. As long as we are beholden to foreign and even hostile countries for our food and our fuel, our freedom is in jeopardy. Since my first day at USDA, we've been committed to addressing this crisis head on. In addition to implementing the historic working families tax cuts, thanks to so many in this room who worked so hard, moving $40 billion in disaster and economic assistance to producers across the country, securing 19 new trade deals, and decreasing that $50 billion agricultural trade deficit in 1 year by 42%. This year, our corn exports are expected to be at a record-breaking 35%, ethanol up 11%, dairy up 15%, and tree nuts up 11%. We are making progress, but we have a ways to go. Administrator Zeldin has secured the strongest renewable fuel standard volumes in history, and the President continues to support year-round E15 for our domestic markets. We have led robust responses to animal health threats, including HPAI and the New World Screwworm, and have reduced unnecessary regulatory burdens and partnered with producers to strengthen the domestic demand for American agriculture. These are lasting reforms and will change the trajectory of American agriculture for the future. The trade agreements will take time to fully execute and generate even more exports. The biofuel investments take time to increase the demand for American crops, although we're already seeing a 10% increase since just an announcement a month ago. And of course, onshoring facilities like fertilizer will continue to take some time to build out. But we are confident that the direction of American agriculture is changing for the better. But many producers continue to face economic pressure as we build that economic infrastructure out. Specialty crop growers across the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, the Pacific Northwest, and Florida suffered devastating freeze losses this past winter. Producers across the plains continue recovering from catastrophic wildfire and events occurring while many operations are still working to catch up financially. That is why our proposal includes $10 billion in temporary economic assistance for 2026 row crop and specialty crop producers, and also includes $1.1 billion to help producers recover from catastrophic freeze losses suffered this past winter. Congress has taken similar action over many decades, and we're so grateful for that, but including most recently 2023 and 2024 with economic aid and disaster relief aid for the hurricane seasons. I want to be 100% clear as I close. For the sake of American national security, American existence, and the American future, we must in the long run end this system that has grown up like a weed and strangled the American farmland and food production. Farmers want to farm for their products, not for a government check. They want to be free from dependency and free to innovate. We know what happens when they are able to do that. They build and feed the greatest republic in the history of man. But when they aren't, well, we know the danger that we are in today. But that's why this supplemental is so important. It provides a bridge and extends a hand to Americans who need it. It buys the nation the security that we need, and it buys us time to deconstruct and then reconstruct a new system, putting our farmers and ranchers first, and to restore the system that originally made America great. For our farmers, the defense of American freedom continues. They only ask to be free to fight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now begin with questions for our witnesses. As you can see, we have a very full attendance of committee members today. So I would ask that all of our colleagues to please keep track of the clock and stay within the allotted 5-minute question time. With that, let me begin. Secretary Hegseth, General Kane. Members on both sides of the aisle have questions about the authorization strategy, objectives, and conduct of operations in the Middle East. Regardless of our differing views, the fact remains that there are must-pay bills and urgent requirements facing the department that affect the ability of our military to deter and defend against potential aggression worldwide. Portions of the supplemental request go toward paying these bills and are necessary to restore readiness, repair, or replace battle damage to aircraft, ships, or bases, and address urgent munitions challenges. I understand and am told that some military services face near-term solvency challenges. What will be the impact on our troops if additional funding is not provided? Are there military exercises, for example, that are at risk of cancellation? What message will we be sending to the world? Secretary Hegseth, either you or Senator or General Kane.
Chairwoman, I very much appreciate that question, and it's because it's connected to the real world realities of this budget cycle. There is training right now and training in the future that would have to be curtailed if we do not get our budget needs met urgently. And yes, some of that has to do with the current budget cycle and how things come together. But we are a department that for 4 years met funding shortfalls under the previous administration. It was not a priority to fund the Department of Defense under Joe Biden. It also took the munitions and a lot of there were 5 supplementals out of this committee that took munitions one for one and sent them to Ukraine and had tried to replace them with the same bureaucratic process that was too slow and didn't replace them in real time. And then there were threats that were ignored around the world. So you're looking at a lot of negligence and a lot of deferred maintenance that this department is having to catch up on. And so that's why I call this a generational investment. It truly is. This is $1.5 trillion budget with this supplemental being part of it is how we catch up and get ahead and ensure in the process we're putting soldiers and sailors and airmen first, Marines first, Guardians, that their pay increases, that the end strength increases that have gone up because recruiting is at historic levels are fully funded. So rather than trying to play catch up and make sure we're not losing training, we should be ahead of that curve. And that's where we think 1.5 trillion can get us.
Thank you. Senator Kane, Senator, I keep calling you Senator General Kane, I'm going to ask you to respond for the record because in my remaining time, I do want to ask Secretary Rollins a question. Secretary Rollins, as we heard from the previous panel, our country has many outstanding recovery needs from disasters and other weather-related events over the past 2 years. As this chart shows, and this is a chart from your department, many have unmet weather-related agricultural losses. In Maine, many of our producers are struggling amid a combination of market volatility and disaster conditions last year, which included excessive rainfall in the spring, followed by a severe drought. They need relief. Yet the administration's supplemental request does not include funding to address these recovery needs. It does have $1.1 billion to help Florida agricultural producers rebound from a severe freeze this past winter, but nothing for prior disasters in other states. Can you explain USDA's thinking behind focusing your request just on the 2026 freeze rather than on the 2025 disaster declarations that you made?
Senator. Yes, Senator, thank you for that question. Obviously the discussions that went on over at OMB and with our teams continue, but what I will say is we are obviously 100% in support of any sort of disaster relief program for our farmers, whether it's hurricane, tornado, drought, freeze, etc. So look forward to working with you on that and specifically understanding the larger context here that there's a lot of farmers, a lot of producers who are really hurting, not just in Florida and not just from the freeze. So it's important that we work together to solve for that.
Thank you. Senator Murray.
Thank you, Chair Collins. Secretary Hegseth, your department received $150 billion last year in the Republicans' Big Beautiful Bill. It also received a record $839 billion for fiscal year 2026, more money than you asked for last year. Combined, that is $1 trillion budget for the year, and as I already mentioned, your department has yet to spend half of the reconciliation funds. And despite that, you are here today asking for tens of billions of dollars more for things that you've already asked for in your FY27 request or that have nothing to do with Iran. This administration has tried to sell this as an emergency request, but it may be better understood as an attempt to skirt the normal appropriations process. Here are just a few of the things requested in this Iran supplemental. $800 million for the National Guard to patrol DC even longer. Over $1 billion for the Army to patrol the southern border, which is DHS's job. $900 million to support the administration's illegal boat strikes in the Caribbean. Over $18 billion for munitions, which you've already requested in your FY27 budget request. And $1.7 billion to pay for your decision to recruit more people than the services need, which was not contemplated by the FY26 funding bill Congress recently passed. Now, you've already submitted a reprogramming request on this that our subcommittee is considering now, which really underscores the point I made in my opening remarks that the problem is not a lack of money, but poor planning. So I'll be blunt. The truth is your request does not make a lot of sense. So let me ask you a simple question. Why exactly are billions of dollars more for the National Guard and this administration's illegal strikes in the Caribbean urgently needed for the Iran war?
Well, Senator, I wouldn't, of course, agree with your characterization, but why this kind of spending is needed is because of the gross negligence and neglect of the Biden administration inside our department. Ran it like a bureaucracy, abandoned our strength posture around the world, so we're having to reestablish deterrence. You mentioned the end strength numbers, and I will acknowledge that we are ahead of schedule on end strength in recruiting. 8,000 in the Navy, 6,000 in the Army, 4,000 in the Air Force. Because under President Trump, there's been record and historic over 30-year recruiting records inside our department since he won the election, because the American people didn't want to sign up for what Joe Biden was providing our military. And they want to sign up for what President Trump is doing in his leadership. And so those are good problems to have that we need to fund and a reflection of momentum. And this budget will allow us to continue the kind of momentum that gets us ahead.
My point is that a lot of this request does not feel like an emergency. And let me move on. Secretary Hegseth, like most Americans, I've had a lot of trouble following this administration's contradictory statements about the war. On April 8th, you said, and I quote, "Their missile program is functionally destroyed, launchers, production facilities, and existing stockpiles depleted and decimated and almost completely ineffective." Mr. Secretary, Iran has been firing at U.S. military bases in the region and at ships for the last week. How is it possible, if their capabilities were, quote, functionally destroyed 3 months earlier, as she claimed, for them to be doing this now?
Well, Senator, Iran is at the weakest point militarily it has ever been in the past decade. Certainly, maybe in 47 years, as they've gathered effectively a terror army. And that terror army was built to try to create conventional capabilities to defend against a pursuit of nuclear weapons, which meant thousands of ballistic missiles, many of which we have destroyed, others of which they have put inside facilities and hidden in underground facilities. And that's what terror regimes would do. So I acknowledge they still have capabilities, no doubt. But the amount of damage that we've done to them over the course of of these series of operations has put them in the worst place they've ever
Okay,
been.
well, let me move on. On May 5th, you claimed that Iran doesn't control the strait, and you said that there was a, quote, powerful red, white, and blue dome over the strait. If that was true, how did Iran shrink ship traffic in the strait to a trickle again last week?
We pushed almost, I believe, between 400 and 500 million barrels of oil under the nose of Iran over the course of Project Freedom, which went underground, which I acknowledged after we did so covertly because it was more effective to do so quietly than to do so publicly. So we've been in control of moving traffic through there for quite some time. Well, they retain the ability to recklessly shoot at commercial shipping, and that's what happened. We had a ceasefire, and then they shot at commercial shipping.
Well, you
recklessly
also said at that same press conference, and I'm going to quote you, you urged Iran to, quote, let innocent ships pass freely. These international waters belong to all nations, not to Iran to tax, toll, or control. Last week, President Trump said the U.S. would charge a 20% toll to each ship to pass through the state. So based on your opposition to tolls, did you talk to the president out of that idea, or did someone else?
Iran's not charging tolls, and they're shooting at ships right now.
But Trump said that he wanted to charge a 20% toll.
We have a blockade right now of all Iranian ships in Iranian ports, and it's effective.
My time is out.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you all for being here. Challenging times, I think we all recognize that. Secretary Hegseth, I want to ask just specific to Iran authorization. The administration has made the case that the action in Iran falls under the president's Article 2 authorities, and we can have disagreement. Reasonable people can disagree about the boundaries of the presidential war powers, and have for a long period of time. But I look at the War Powers Resolution, and it's not ambiguous. It requires the president to terminate hostilities within 60 days, absent congressional authorization. So hostilities began February 28th. On May 1st, Congress was informed that hostilities had ended, but yet despite the fact that the hostilities had ended, we were still seeing sailors being fired upon still activity. Then in June, MOU is signed to preserve the ceasefire while negotiations continue. That MOU has now collapsed, and we're seeing the resumed attacks in the Straits of Hormuz. On July 10, the administration sends Congress a new war powers notification, effectively restarting the 60-day clock again. So I'm concerned about this sequence because you have a situation where the claim essentially allows the president to extinguish the war powers clock just at the moment that it becomes legally inconvenient through declaration of temporary ceasefire. Then it's reset, avoiding the congressional authorization that the Constitution requires and the war powers intends. So we had an opportunity in previous appropriations hearing for me to ask if you felt the administration had all the authority that it needed. You indicated at that time that no, additional authority was not needed. Is the administration still taking that position about needing no authorization from Congress at this time?
Senator, I know there's a long-standing legal debate on this particular topic, but we certainly as a department share the position of the White House that we have all the authorities necessary at this moment.
So let me just kind of do a follow-on. In the Clinton administration, this is 1999, there was an operation that was launched, Operation Allied Force, NATO airstrikes against Yugoslavia. There was not prior congressional authorization that was sought. President Clinton notified Congress under the War Powers Resolution, and then subsequent to that, sent Congress an emergency supplemental funding request. It was about $6 billion to cover the cost of Kosovo operations. Congress then passed a supplemental package that covered the president's request plus additional military funding. But Congress never passed a standalone authorization for use of military force in Kosovo. When the war powers clock was set to run out then in May of 1999, the Clinton Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel issued an opinion holding that the supplemental appropriation itself, passed without any authorizing language, satisfied the war powers resolution requirement. So is the department looking to that or intending to rely on that same reasoning that funding alone can substitute for explicit congressional authorization?
Senator, I would have to defer to our legal department, and we'll get back to you with our views on that. But as of right now, we think standalone Article 2 authorities exist for us to conduct this operation on behalf of the defense of the American people, that the president has those authorities, and seeking this funding is important in pursuit of that and our $1.5 trillion budget. But I wouldn't connect the two without consulting with our legal folks first.
In my remaining time, let me turn to you, Secretary Rollins. I appreciate that you have acknowledged that fishermen are farmers of the sea. I don't know whether you are aware whether any fishermen will be eligible for any of the supplemental funding. They too have faced many of the same challenges that our farmers have with high fuel costs, the impact from tariffs, disasters that we have seen. In the 15 seconds remaining, any help for our fishermen?
Well, I remember having the conversation with you when we were going through the process, and my commitment to you and to Senator Collins and some of our others on across the aisle was that it's time for USDA to recognize our fishermen as part of our farmers of the sea. That's never happened before. We now have an office at USDA focused on fishermen, and so I think as you all move forward with the supplemental, the conversation, and obviously up to you all what that looks like, but very supportive of treating our fishermen similarly to the rest of our farmers. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, I'd like to ask you to help me reconcile some numbers. It's my understanding that this whole supplemental funding request is $87.6 billion, and most of the funding, $67 billion, is for the Department of Defense. Yet we are told the Department of Defense still has $75 billion in unobligated funding from last year's reconciliation package. Is that true?
Roughly correct numbers, yes.
So you left some change on the dresser before you prepared to come for this hearing. What's going to happen to that $75 billion?
Well, that 75 there's plans and designs on that, part of the rebuild of our military, which had to be undertaken. And so the One Big Beautiful Bill gave us specific avenues, but I'd have to get you the exact numbers of what that is left to be allocated.
Does it have to do with the war in Iran?
No, this is rebuilding our military from what was not funded in the past under the Biden administration. So this is from 2026, One Big Beautiful Bill, which helped move the president's priorities like Golden Dome for America, move away from all the woke priorities of what the Biden administration was pursuing, give us a chance to start cutting these deals on munitions, all the things that the president wanted us to focus on: shipbuilding, hypersonics. I mean, the Biden administration ignored hypersonics. They just decided to pretend like that technology didn't exist and we shouldn't invest in it. There are things, I don't know what Lloyd Austin did for 4 years. I really don't.
Well, sure.
The amount of neglect, the amount of stale thinking and bureaucracy, it was staggering when we took over. So One Big Beautiful Bill gave us a chance.
Let me interrupt your speech for a minute, Mr. Secretary. It's my turn to ask questions. I've been listening patiently while you made your presentation. You estimated at one point that the cost of the war in Iran was $29 billion, but then added a caveat that there was a replacement of munitions, for example. Do you have a new estimate about what the war has cost us so far in the 5th month of the first year of this war in Iran?
Senator, the estimate we have as of today is $37.5 billion.
And is the current activity, which we've been told about, the exchange of fire back and forth in Iran, an indication that that number is going to go up in the months ahead?
Some of that number captures additional O&M, mill pay, and other that would be anticipated through the fiscal year. So some of that anticipates what costs would be going out in the future as well.
So the new number you've given me is what?
$37.5 billion. So
and that represents the cost of the war through what period of time?
Through now for certain aspects of it, but also mill pay, O&M, other anticipated costs through September 30th. Senator.
General Kane, let me ask you a question. I joined a group of senators, some are here, Senator Rounds, Senator Coons, Senator Shaheen, and met with President Zelensky in Turkey during the NATO summit. He was very explicit in terms of what he needed to win. He feels the momentum in Ukraine is moving to his side, that he is putting a foot forward instead of back. Is that your feeling?
Sir, I think the pressure that Ukraine is putting on Russia is substantive at this point.
Do you acknowledge his request that we help them with air defenses as a high priority?
Sure, I know he's made the request. Whether or not that moves forward is always a debate at our civilian leadership, but I'm aware of that request.
Are you aware of the fact that we appropriated and the president signed into law $400 billion of supplemental funding for Ukraine, including money for air defenses?
I am, sir.
Are you also aware the administration has informed us that that money will not be available in many aspects until the next president is in office?
Sure, I'm not aware of that. My understanding was that capital had been allocated, but I'll have to defer to my civilian leadership.
No, I'm sorry to tell you the pay plan tells us to be prepared to spend that money in fiscal year 29.
What happened?
29. The new president, whoever it may be, will make that decision. If you're talking about air defenses and the momentum on the side of Zelensky, what impact will it have if we cannot fund this for 3 years?
Sure, I want to highlight that the incredible work that the Ukraine industrial base is doing as they scale their own capabilities. It ranges from their surface-to-air capabilities to their air-to-air capabilities. I'll note that recently we had the first air-to-air kill where a Ukrainian F-16 shot down a Russian fighter. So I think their ability to scale their layered defense has come along a long way over the past couple years with the help and assistance of many.
General, thank you for your service to the country, and I'm sorry for our losses. I believe 17 servicemen have given their lives in Iran so far, and hundreds have been injured. We should acknowledge that fact. And let me also say, we're at a moment in history where we can win the war in Ukraine. That victory would be critically important for those people who have fought for more than 4 years against the odds and proven they can put Putin back on his heels. But instead of finding the money that they need now for air defenses, we're putting more money into this exchange with Iran, a war of choice which we never should have entered. Thank you, General.
Senator Moran.
Chairwoman,
Don't agree with him there, but
let
he's
me
entitled
first
to his
begin,
opinion.
with just a statement to you, Secretary Rollins. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your attention to disaster assistance. Hugely significant and important in many states represented here, but across the country. And it is as challenging circumstances as I've seen farmers in my time and representing them in the United States Congress. And I appreciate my colleague, Senator Rounds, for making that case today. I appreciate the efforts by Senator Bozeman, the chairman of the Ag Committee, and Senator Rounds and his Vice Chairman Shaheen for their efforts here on this committee for that effort. Secretary Hegseth, let me ask you about your recent visit to the 101st Airborne Division. You saw the MV-75 Cheyenne. You saw it firsthand and heard from soldiers, as I understand it, about the next generation capabilities, how they will transform the way we fight. The Cheyenne has broken through, and it appears to me, in the acquisition bureaucracy to deliver a capability for our war fighting much faster than it otherwise would have happened. As you look across acquisition, I mean, we're here talking about appropriations, but the ultimate success we'll have in defending our country is putting that money to work as quickly as possible. So as you look at acquisition, what would you tell me we learned from the Cheyenne? Is it a model how the department it intends to field the next generation of capacity going forward? What does the program need from this committee to meet both the schedule and the necessity of its capabilities?
Senator, I appreciate the question. I think it's one of the untold stories of our department is how we've try to revolutionize the speed and scale of new acquisitions and procurement. Some of it through munitions and ensuring that companies pay for building their own factories and their own assembly lines so that we're saving billions and billions as taxpayers while companies invest. And when you invest in something with your own money, you want to see it succeed ahead of schedule and on time. Also opening the aperture so it's not just the prime contractors that are competing, but new entrants who make high cost and low cost capabilities. I think in particular on the Cheyenne and the Black Hawk and the replacement, the gap that some have identified could exist based on the hesitation on speed and replacement exists because of an austerity mindset, again, that goes back to the Biden administration of divest to invest. And so you end up divesting in certain systems like the Black Hawk before the next one is online, creating gaps for actual operators. And what we're funding in this supplemental and across this budget is the ability to do both. Make sure the systems we rely on the battlefield right now are delivered, and that newer entrants that we're going to need for long-range fight to deliver, to be more survivable in contested environments, which you're talking about. When I had a chance to see it, the soldiers were proud to be in it because they felt like it would give them greater advantage in the future. We need to accelerate the timelines of those and deliver them even more quickly. And when you allow new entrants with all the right incentives, those things happen, and it's happening in that.
Will that take place? I think you may have just said this, but will take place in this circumstance of the Cheyenne?
I believe in this administration, because of the policies of this administration, it is likely to do so. Just like the B-21, just like the F-47, just like so many other of our exquisite munitions that otherwise would have taken years and years to even get into development. We're moving those things left by, in some cases, years, so that we get them in the hands of warfighters who need them right now and not held up in bureaucracy in this town.
Thank you, sir. Let me turn to you, General Kane. The department is requesting a significant supplemental to address the ongoing operational demands. Our adversaries are watching how we resource this moment. Beijing, Moscow, Tehran are all increasingly coordinating their activities and intelligence. In your judgment, do you believe our adversaries view this moment as an opportunity to exploit U.S. commitments elsewhere? And how does this supplemental ensure our deterrence posture and our commitments to allies remain credible in every theater all at once?
Well, sir, thanks for the question. In my job, it's to look across the globe and look at the range of trade-offs out there. But we are the strongest military in the world. Our adversaries still fear America's ability to project power at the time and place of our choosing. There is no doubt that they are aligning, as I've said before. And I think this supplemental and whatever funding structure that Congress, working with the executive branch, decides to structure and give us the capital, we'll use that capital to ensure that we sustain that.
So you're assuring us that this supplemental and further efforts will reduce the risks to our nation and its national securities.
Yes, sir. I view this, and I've spoken to some of you on the phone leading up to this. I view this as future investments to buy down risk, similar to what I said Marshall thought through in those heady days in 1940, where the need to invest capital early to deliver scale is an opportunity that I hope we don't miss, Senator.
General, thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Senator Reed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Secretary Rollins, I just want to reiterate a point that Senator Padilla made. We have $10 billion in this request for Midwestern farmers who are suffering because of the interruption of fuel and fertilizers because of the President Trump's war, unauthorized war. Yet, many states, blue states particularly, have submitted requests. Rhode Island has one. February, we had the worst snowstorm in our recent history, and we've been denied by the president. In fact, if you look at the numbers, 20% of blue states seem to get approved, and about 80% of red states. I'm making a point, not asking a question. This is unfair. Thank you.
I don't know what happened.
Is open and providing vital fuel supplies for the whole world. Now they're closed effectively, impacting globally the price of oil and the economies of the whole world. But the Department of Defense has been planning for potential operations against Iran for many, many years. And one of their obvious assumptions was that the Strait of Hormuz could be closed. Were you unaware of that?
Senator, you are correct. Nobody plans more and looks at more contingencies than our department. And so, of course, undertaking a historic effort like this, of this scope and scale, of course, the Strait of Hormuz was front and center in every single aspect of that. Hence why one of our key objectives to begin with was to sink the entirety of Iran's Navy, which its conventional Navy was sunk. Now, you can't get rid of every single fast boat and every single machine gun and a fast boat or every single coastal cruise missile. So we acknowledge that if the state decided to become a terror state shooting at commercial shipping, that would be an ongoing and contested part of the battle, to include their willingness to mine international waters. So one side weaponized the strait, and we've been fighting back.
Completely aware that the Strait of Hormuz could be closed, and obviously sinking their ships has not affected their ability to effectively close the straits.
We had U.S. boats that surrendered to Iranian ships under the Biden administration. So their Navy was effective in
we're talking about the war you started, not a situation in which oil was flowing freely. There was no conflict. We weren't losing personnel as a result of Iranian actions. So your fallback to the Biden administration is just a very, very obvious excuse for what I think is probably, as you described so often, gross negligence. You did not fully inform the president that you would be in a situation where the Strait of Hormuz could be effectively closed, oil prices could surge, and effectively the Iranians could maintain their ability to strike back as they are right now. They just killed some of our servicemen last weekend.
This battlefield and all the dynamics of it, of which the chairman and I are responsible for ensuring the president understands every branch and sequel of what could happen, and we did.
So
the fact that those contingencies all were part of the possibility, and we understood that, is all the more reason why President Trump deserves the kind of praise he should get for undertaking this effort, having the courage to ensure that crazy Islamists can't have a nuclear weapon to hold us at issue. And he's been willing to stay true to that regardless of the challenges.
Excuse me. So he should be praised. He should be praised for starting a war without authority, creating a situation in which the world economy is suffering tremendously. We have to have extra money for our farmers, and we have no outcome, at least no realistic outcome in sight yet. Let me switch to General Kane. General Kane, these airstrikes have not yet deterred and defeated the Iranians. Do you think airstrikes alone will do that?
So I think academically, as you look across the totality of history, air power's got limits, and we always have to be mindful of those. I think where America's area of exclusivity is when we bring the totality of the diplomatic, informational, economic, and pair that with the military, and there's a lot of that work going on.
Well, the military, the next step would be escalation by ground combat. Do you anticipate that escalation?
Sure, I think it'd be unhelpful for me to opine on hypotheticals. What I can tell you is we always develop an unbelievable amount of options and the associated risks, and then my main job is to always ensure that leaders understand those options and the risks.
Now, if you employ ground troops to seize objectives, which I would assume would be the first stage, are you prepared for an extended guerrilla war, which would likely happen in that area?
Sir, with all due respect, I think it'd be unhelpful for me to opine on hypothetical situations, on whatever decisions the president may or may not take in the future.
Have you advised the president that a ground combat would be very expensive in the lives of our soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and also could probably lead to an extended unconventional war in that area? I don't see the Iranians sort of throwing their hands up saying,
on a range of military options and all of the risks that are contained within that, but I have to keep my military advice to the president private, sir.
But, well, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Rollins, I want to thank President Trump. I want to thank you for including farm bridge assistance in this supplemental request. I know I've worked very hard to get included. I know you have worked very hard to get included, and I want to thank you and your whole department for your work on it and for this vital support of our farmers and ranchers. What I want to ask you about, though, is actually crop insurance. The number one risk management tool that our farmers have is crop insurance. And the buy-up option is critically important. It covers 67 million acres, 67 million acres of farmland in this country. It was decommissioned, and we need to get it reinstated. Again, you and I both worked very hard on this. Please update me on where we are in terms of getting that buy-up option for crop insurance reinstated.
We are 100% supportive of that and are moving forward to execute that buy-up option. Thank you for your leadership on that, Senator.
Thank you for your support. Also, Assistant Secretary Fortas for his support. It's very impactful, very important, and will make a big difference for our farmers right now. So thank you for that. Secretary Hegseth, are Russia and China helping Iran? And if so, how?
Well, Senator, as the chairman alluded to, there's definitely adversary alignment, attempts to do so, and there are many ways that we deter that, some of which are, and the depth and extent of it ought to remain classified, and it should, but there are ways in which both of those countries are limiting at different levels, enabling some of the things Iran is doing. Yes.
General Kane, would you like to add?
Sir, I'd rather not opine on the specifics because that would divulge what we know, and I never want the adversary to know what I know. I just want to know it.
And hopefully we'll get a chance to do that in
Yes, sir.
SCIF.
Yes, sir. Happy to do that in SCIF, sir.
This relates both to the funding, but also again to how we achieve our objectives with Iran. Starting with you, Secretary, can we get to the point, and we're seeing continued, I think, improvement and progress on this, but essentially where we can, and hopefully our allies they need to step in there with us, but where we get to the point where we can operate in the Strait of Hormuz, but keep Iran blockaded. We're continuing to get better at that, but that's how they'll never do anything that they say they're going to do. They've proven that over and over. We have to keep the pressure on. But if we can do that effectively, we keep the pressure on and achieve our objectives. Tell us where we are in getting that accomplished.
Senator, I think that's a really good point. That's effectively what we did to create the pressure that led to the circumstances of the MOU, which was we're running a route where ships, and we did it covertly in cooperation with Gulf countries and others who were willing to take some of the risk with our protection and then maintain the blockade. So effectively, oil's coming in and out, oil prices are coming down, but our blockade is staying and the pressure is mounting on Iran. That's something we have done and can continue to do. We moved into an MOU where Iran said we won't shoot at shipping, and then the IRGC turned around and decided to start shooting at commercial shipping again. At which point the president, as he should, cannot tolerate that, and so we respond, as he said 10 times, you shoot at ships, we're going to shoot at you overwhelmingly, which we have been doing now for, I believe it's a 10th consecutive evening. So consequences come with the willingness to shoot at commercial shipping. Our blockade has been reimposed and is effectively impenetrable. We got seized a ship inside the Arabian Gulf as well. So there's a lot of different angles to it, a lot of levers we can pull, and ultimately a lot of the strikes that Admiral Cooper and CENTCOM have been undertaking are taking Iran's ability to see and sense away in the Strait of Hormuz, which has tactical benefits for us.
And that's what this funding is about. This funding is about making sure that we and our allies can operate in the Strait of Hormuz, which helps bring down energy prices for every single American consumer, and that we force Iran to meet our objectives. Isn't that what this package is all about?
This is a peace through strength package. Right. That's what 1.5 trillion has always been about, a generational investment at as the chairman alluded to, a step change moment. We need to be able to do it at speed, at scale, with autonomy, with AI, with exquisite high cost and low cost, to be ahead and stay ahead so that you're not just able to do what we need to do in the Strait of Hormuz, but deter adversaries like Russia and China from getting involved in future contingencies.
And just General Kane, for any follow-up that you would like on that issue.
Sir, I wouldn't have anything to add.
Okay, again, thank you, and thank you to all of our men and women in uniform. We appreciate them so much.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Hegseth, since you last testified before this committee, we finally received the spend plan for the $400 million FY26 appropriation for Ukraine security assistance. This funding was passed back in January, and now there are only 3 months left in this fiscal year. And while I appreciate that we now see what most of the funding is intended for, I just heard from the CEO of one of the manufacturers of the defense articles that are contained in the spend plan that they not only haven't received funding, but they haven't even seen a contract. So when are we going to see a contract for those defense articles that are contained in the spend plan for Iraq? For Ukraine.
For Ukraine. Senator, I'll have to get back to you on the specifics of the timeline of that. I'll talk to our policy shop as well as the UCOM commander to determine where that's at.
Well, you've told this committee that you've barely spent half of the $150 billion in reconciliation funding. And if you still have $75 billion available, why are you asking the American people to absorb the cost of a war they don't support, instead of asking for transfer authority for unspent reconciliation funding, especially if you can't even get $400 million in Ukraine funding out the door?
As I mentioned earlier, Senator, that money from the One Big Beautiful Bill is otherwise allocated to the rebuilding of our military with priorities of the president like Golden Dome for America and hypersonics and other munitions investments that we made up front as we tried to adjust the Biden budget into an America First budget. And so reallocating that away from those priorities is robbing Peter to pay Paul. Those are allocated to rebuild.
But my point is,
ultimately
if you can't spend it on a timeline that makes sense, why do you need to come back and ask for more money? Wouldn't it be better to spend money that you already have? And one of the things I noted was, or at least I think, that this supplemental doesn't include funding to repair damage to our bases or to our military infrastructure in the region. And I have not heard that we've gotten the full extent of any of those damage estimates. So should we expect another request to address that military construction costs? And at what point do you stop asking Americans to foot the bill for a war they don't support on top of an inflated budget request and billions in reconciliation funds that you still haven't spent?
Well, Senator, I obviously don't agree with your characterization of that.
I appreciate that, but you didn't ask me. But I want you to answer my question. I know you don't agree with my characterization. I don't agree with yours either.
Well, one of the reasons I take issue with that characterization is something that Senator Durbin said when he talked about Ukraine and he talked about winning. And I appreciate as much as anybody winning a war. But I sit in front of a committee that wants to talk about winning a war that's been going on for 4 years and talks about strategic defeat of a conflict that's been going on for 4 months to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. I would hope for some perspective in this town of the historic nature of what President Trump is undertaking. Do you want radical Islamists to have a nuclear bomb?
I don't want to hear your speech because I have limited time.
I don't understand.
If you can't answer my question, then I will move on to my next question. Secretary Rollins, the timber industry has also been hard hit, as you know, by trade wars, by drought, by wildfires, by other natural disasters that are increasingly common. In New Hampshire, which is the second most heavily forested state in the nation.
All right, good afternoon, live from Texas. This is the Will Cain Show. You have been watching Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Cain, and Agricultural Secretary Brooke Rollins testifying before the Senate Appropriations Committee. They're asking for additional Pentagon funding, and Secretary Hegseth says by September, the conflict in Iran will total $37.5 billion as they move to talking about agriculture and raise questions and answers about the cost of this war in Iran. We're going to keep you up to date. We'll be monitoring the hearing and bringing you anything as it comes in. But now we move to this. Blue MAGA has entered the chat. That's according to Lefty Streamer and Chairman Mao, big fan, Hassan Piker. As he explained to the New York Times, Blue MAGA is about cult-like loyalty to the Democrat Party. But unlike MAGA, it isn't centered around one person. It's centered around the image of a party that consultants and lobbyists have carefully curated. MAGA leaves the power in the hands of Donald Trump. Blue MAGA leaves the power in the hands of a neoliberal Democrat Party that tells them better things aren't possible. Now, it's easy and tempting to laugh at the source, to look at Hassan Piker, to look at his wardrobe, to look at his fetishization of totalitarians, and simply dismiss Piker. But that would be a mistake. It would be a mistake specifically for Democrats.
No more to Trumpism, but no more to the Democrats who compromise, who conciliate, and who betray us. No more to the Democrats who will collaborate and cooperate with the fascists, who will fund ICE, who will fund Israel, who will help poison the planet. We don't need those Democrats anymore. In fact, we have a message. We are coming.
Collaborate. It's not the kind of word you stumble upon. It's a very intentional, purposeful word. It's the type of word that's used by the secret police when they show up to the door of a professor to say you are collaborating with the wrong people. It's a warning to Democrats. But it's also, this entire concept of blue MAGA, something that we all, Democrats or Republicans, should listen to, because I think it's true. You see, for more than a decade now, the Democrat Party has radicalized its own base. They've been going after Donald Trump because they decided that he was illegitimate. They have called him a fascist. They called him a Nazi. And now they are discovering that they cannot control the rhetoric or the base that has responded to that rhetoric.
The Democratic Party is in the middle of a civil war, right? And you have moderate mainstream Democrats, such as myself, which have been challenged by the far left extremists.
Less a civil war, more a rebellion, a socialist rebellion that they encouraged. Quite honestly, what we're watching is the birth of baby Frankenstein. They fed this, encouraged it, rewarded it, and now, all of a sudden, they're surprised that baby Frankenstein has his own ideas.
I am tired of a set of people on the very far left in the Democratic Party telling us that in order for us to be progressives, we now have to believe ideas and support ideas that are completely nuts. No police, no prisons, we can't deport anybody, even if they commit rape or murder. Israel shouldn't exist. These are terrible ideas. Where did these ideas even come from?
I've got an idea where they came from. You have spent decades now talking about this exact type of movement. Now you can't look up and say it doesn't represent us. Now you can't look up and say this isn't who we are. You've been lurching to the left. Colin Wright, famously, in a cartoon retweeted by Elon Musk years ago, pointed out the direction of the Democrat Party.
The Democratic Party has melted away.
Someone like him who would describe himself as center left was standing next to someone who would have described themselves on the left. But as the left continued through the years to run to the left, it wasn't the center that moved. In fact, it was the center that got pushed toward the right because progressives ran further and further. By 2021, that cartoon shows you a leftist far running off the screen yelling bigot at somebody on the center. If you updated that image to 2026, you would see a leftist run even further. Knelt, crouched, laying down in a prone position with a rifle, pointing it back at the center and the right, yelling Nazi. You see, when it comes to progressivism, there is no destination. It's only acceleration. It's a movement defined by movement. It's always about more. And the Democrat Party gave this movement the only push it needed.
This year, this country could very well go the way of Germany in the 1930s.
Comparing the tactics of Donald Trump to Mussolini and Hitler is a very legitimate thing.
I don't care what Elon Musk is doing behind a presidential seal. In this country, we hate Nazis.
We have a Timmu Hitler in the White House right now that thinks that he is going to become the dictator of the United States.
Communist.
Years of that. And those are mainstream Democrats. Those are not members of the DSA. And if they tell their followers that, how could the followers ever compromise? How could they ever moderate? How could they ever say, actually, maybe deporting violent criminals is sane? The establishment, Democrats, removed moderation from the equation. And in its place, they added a call to action.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country.
I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
I don't swear in public very long.
If that's your starting point, how do you look up with surprise at the place you end up?
Left-wing terrorism always ends in bloodshed, misery, and suffering. It only can travel in one direction. There's no point at which the left-wing terrorist is satisfied with his gains and ceases progressing. Inevitably, left to run its course, it always becomes a gulag.
And now today we listen to the party establishment looking around and telling us this has gone too far, but this is of their own creation, even if it has left them behind. And now Democratic Socialists are ready to take the wheel. Baby Frankenstein is ready to now be in charge.
The responsibility that we have as Americans, the recognition that is going to be required of us, of the exploitative and extractive nature that we play on the global scale and the global stage, is only going to be challenged if we are getting represented by people who understand that on a fundamental level, right? And that means getting more immigrants into office. That means getting more people who have heritage in the global South into office. Because
make America the third world again. So what now? Where do we go from here? Well, historically, when Democrats don't like where their voters go, they don't try to persuade them. They overrule them. Let's look at the history. They kneecapped Bernie Sanders in favor of Hillary Clinton. 2 years ago today, they swapped out Joe Biden for Kamala Harris. They dropped Graham Plattner for someone yet to be chosen by party insiders. That is Blue MAGA. That is the machine that tells its own people, we know what's best for you. Now, Democrats are finding out the hard way. This is what you get. You get the platform of the Democratic Socialist of America, and your only response to stopping defunding the Department of War or replacing the president and the Supreme Court is to anti-democratically undercut the voice of your very own people. You can't all of a sudden ask everyone to calm down after years of calling your opponents fascists. Eventually, you'll have to watch your own back. You might be a collaborator. Joining me now is former Pennsylvania Democrat Congressman Patrick Murphy. Patrick, I know you agree with every single word that I said, right? And you're terrified that you're going to be hauled into a gulag as a collaborator. You're on Fox, Patrick.
Hey, I'm an American patriot, Will, and I appreciate that. Hey, listen, I will say this. I know there's a lot of folks that want to talk about, let's blame, who's to blame in the Democratic Party, et cetera, right? Like you, I'm a leader, right? The blame says who's at fault. Let's talk about responsibility. Responsibility is what can we do about it? I blame both parties, Will, literally both parties, because they've ignored the affordability crisis that's going around and happening to everyday American families. Neither party is addressing it. Neither party. And that's why, I don't agree with the things that were said there,
Well, okay. But I disagree with what you just said, so let's pick up on where I disagree.
Okay, sure.
First, let's start where we do agree. Yeah, affordability is a real issue in America. We've dealt with for years, especially under the Biden administration, hyperinflation. We had inflation up to 9%. Even today, gas prices are not where the American people want them, and things are unaffordable, including housing. However,
was there another channel
I do not believe this
that the committee was on? Well, I thought you switched to get onto this.
It was.
But
They
is there
stopped
not?
it.
In dozens of years. I think you go back to the 80s since you've had this kind of thing. And back then it was the right way. The white supremacists, things like that, the posse comitatus, things like that. And now we've got the left wing, the anarchists, and the anti-government people. So it is probably the highest I've ever seen it.
And it's not hard to guess how this maniac became so radical. Democrats have spent months demonizing ICE agents and calling them Nazis.
So we can't allow ourselves to devolve into a society where we condone having a secret police.
These officers that are often very rogue individuals with opinions already, very extreme opinions about immigrants.
ICE has nothing to do with immigration. ICE has nothing to do with the southern border. ICE is about normalizing paramilitary force on our streets.
These thugs want an excuse to shoot someone like they're patrolling the Warsaw Ghetto in 1941. That's
Remember, there was another, almost detonation a couple of months ago here in New York City. There was that Muslim situation, and now this. I mean, this is crazy.
So it is, and thankfully there weren't more people injured, but I don't know exactly what the motivation is. It'll be interesting to see if it comes out. I don't even think he's been charged yet, but there's multiple things that he could be charged with. When you listed all of the things that he had on him, he had intent to harm. You don't walk around with a machete around New York City for no reason. I am interested about the connection on the rhetoric. If you think about last week, Secretary Rubio gave a big speech with 60 other countries there, talking about the problems of left-wing radical terrorism. And those countries were there for a reason. They weren't there just because they got invited. They know that they have a problem as well. And he said, we have to do something to try to fight back against it. When you think about what they're saying about ICE, they're saying about Trump, is it the permission structure that says, well, it's okay, then maybe you ought to do something about it? If they think it's just rhetoric, then one, you could change your rhetoric. But two, if you don't connect these dots like that former FBI agent is doing, it could lead to something much more serious than this.
Yeah, this is the second attack. I think there was one in Texas, Craig, where the guy tried to shoot ICE agents, ended up shooting an illegal immigrant.
Well, clearly, Jesse, there are two sides. Both sides are guilty of this. Did you see, it was a couple days ago, a maniac in New York City attacked a baby in a stroller, hit the baby in the head with a phone. Turns out the guy had 20 plus felony arrests, all kinds of violence. He was on the street. But if you ask any of these Democrats about that, they'd go, well, both, what did the baby do? Was the baby Jewish? We don't know. Did the baby deserve it? I have no idea. That's how they look at these things. Rather than the data, they kind of immediately go to the default both sides story. Exactly what you said. What do you expect to happen when you remove debate? You're left only with violence. You have outspoken leaders, progressive leaders, saying it's immoral to engage in debate with evil people. And evil people are always on the other side. So instead, they will focus on personalized attacks. We're seeing kind of like a broad-based MK Ultra. Any type of man, female, a teenager who's a little bit unhinged will buy into the personalized attacks and do this. People said, if you argued with Charlie Kirk, you're only helping him. So it's better not to. So instead of debate, you end up with death. He's off the chessboard. That's what happens in a culture that's saturated with personalized attacks instead of ideas. And it's not just ICE. It's obviously it's the border, it's crime, and it's trans. That's where you're seeing a lot of the violence. And we're not trying. It's not us who's trying to shut down speech. We're not the ones saying we don't want to talk to you. We don't shut down protests. When we're on protests, we'll talk to people when we're on campus. During COVID, we weren't trying to shut down speech. We don't try to get speakers thrown off colleges. We would say, let's talk. But they say, we don't talk to monsters. They will say Israel is genocidal. They will say Trump is racist. They'll say I'm a transphobe. And all of this is so they don't have to discuss it. You leapfrog over that, and you end up at one spot, and that is violence.
I want to hear more about this baby.
It's in the news.
Okay.
Do I have to do the news for you?
Sometimes you do. Jessica, would you care to respond to any specific things that Greg said during that last monologue?
We'll go with the general vibe, which is left-wing violence is on the upswing. It's indisputable. It's in the numbers. I'm big on the data. It shows that over the last couple of years, there has been a spike in it. If you look at the overall numbers, whether you go to the Government Accountability Office, Cato, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, some academics out of the University of Dayton, it still shows that right-wing violence is more than left-wing violence, but it's a problem. Well, I'm sorry that the totality of the story
matters. If we drill down that stuff, we find it to be bogus.
All right, I'm sure that you would.
Because all you have to do is mention the crimes. No. If we actually did that, we would have to go into the next hour.
Well, I'll be back tomorrow and the day after and the day after
that. But then you never bring them.
Tom Homan did the Sunday shows, and he was out speaking in front of the White House, and he made this comment where he said, "I'm afraid we're going to bury an ICE agent." And I understand that fear, and he's in charge of that law enforcement agency, and that completely makes sense to me that he's concerned about that. What is missing from Homan's comments and the discourse on this is that the American people are sitting there and saying, well, you buried Alex Preddy, and you buried Renee Good, and you buried all of these people who, yes, civil infraction, crossed the border illegally, one of whom just in Maine from last week actually had work authorization, and you buried them because of what happened between them and an altercation with an ICE agent. So having this as a one-sided conversation where Homan shows no concern for the people like Alex Preddy or Renee Good who died doesn't sound like he sounded when he got to Minneapolis, when he came in and he said, I'm here to clean up, essentially. Things have gone wrong here. And now we have reverted back to a world in which it sounds more just like Stephen Miller, day in and day out. And the American people are saying, that's not how this works. You have to be concerned about the fact that maybe an ICE agent could die, and we talked about that in Texas when the ICE detention facility came under attack by left-wing protesters, but showing no concern for people who are here illegally and even American citizens who have died at the hands of ICE completely misses the point. And it's the reason that this administration is getting such low marks when it comes to immigration. Trump's done -19, and this was his best issue in 2020.
Those weren't attacks on illegals or American citizens.
Yes.
These are attacks on...
Greg.
Yes, they are. When you're dealing with aggressive protesters, you do the job the best you can. That is not an attack. You can't compare them.
You are very hard pressed. And maybe you have a different set of folks that you're talking to. For people who have seen the videos now of what happened with Alex Preddy and Renee Good and would say that they deserved to die.
I don't understand how you can compare the two, because they're doing their job. These people interfere. They have to do their job. If they weren't there being aggressive and pressing on the gas, that wouldn't have happened.
Their job actually is to de-escalate, first of all. Well, and also to have a full investigation when we know that the feds were blocking information.
You guys had a shot at securing the border and you blew it.
So now they die.
No, now
well,
you just
that's literally
let
what
us
you're saying.
do the job you guys couldn't do.
But you're doing it badly.
It doesn't even matter anymore. We gotta get
tell us what you should have done that you didn't do, that Trump is now doing because you didn't do it.
Yeah, we gotta get Emily in the conversation. Go ahead.
You know the saying, bad things happen so worse things don't? I feel like that is being totally obliterated now. What we are seeing is a toe in the water by all of these radicals and extremists who have been given not just approval by the libs and the Democratic leadership, but straight up encouragement to attack ICE. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is, so someone can light gasoline on fire with fireworks in front of the building here, and that then teaches everyone, well, tomorrow you can do worse. What we are seeing is an escalation of, this is totally different, by the way, than law enforcement's reactions to protesters that are breaking the law. This is an attack on law enforcement because it has been blessed and encouraged by people on the left and social media who refuse to condemn it. So you said what's missing is Tom Homan's compassion for Peretti or Renee Good. What is missing is a condemnation by the Democrats and the libs and anyone with a mouthpiece that these freaks listen to that says, do not attack ICE. Instead, they are being called Gestapo. Instead, people are calling Homan Hitler. The governor of that state totally blessed and encouraged people to attack ICE because he called them Nazis. So this is a direct result. By the way, I talked to a federal agent about this today. Said morale is super low. And he said it's these politicians that have encouraged, that have pushed the policies, make the laws that make it harder and less safe, he's saying, for us to enforce laws that have been on the books for years. And he says, and it's the same people that are pushing that rhetoric that gets all of those radicals worked up and convinced that targeting us is okay. So none of them have a microphone. None of them get to be online smashing everyone. And keep in mind, a lot of people that we have put behind bars for a really long time tested stuff operationally or diversionarily, and that's what I see happening here. So to me, that's the tip of the iceberg. That guy with gasoline that NBC called, simply fireworks. By the way, if you want to learn more about the baby watch out number.
Okay.
Not the news.
Ahead, how Kamala got her groove back by ditching the consultants for the commies.